Welcome, everyone. I am really glad you all made it tonight. We are at Faith Arts, and we're experiencing the intersection of Christianity and the arts. My name is Lorenda Harder, and our Light Up with Lewis, C.S. Lewis, subject for this month's discussion is Bubbling Up the Message, Part 1, our development as artists. You know, a part of how to bubble up the message is by our skill. The more skilled we are, the clearer our message will be. If we look at Lewis's bubbling up from like two different perspectives, one might be about the message bubbling up, and the other might be how our methods bubble up out of our lives. And we'll discuss how we know our craft is good enough to put out there, and how it's similar really to how we know our message is good enough. We know our message is good enough by working truths of Scripture into our hearts. Then when we're working on our art, it just bubbles up naturally. We don't even have to be conscious of it at that point. It's similar with our methods. We can learn to work standards of beauty through practice and knowledge, and we work them into our craft. So while we're working, again, it's not like we're necessarily very conscious about our skills at that point. We're just letting our skills bubble up. And so tonight we're going to consider the aspect of skill or method. And the next time for Bubbling Up Part 2, we'll focus on the message. And I know it got really hot on our Facebook group, which is great. I just love all the discussion we're having on our Facebook group. And I look forward tonight and to the next message as well. And then I just might mention too that next month, in between our two Bubbling Up talks, we're getting a special guest, Terry Olson. And so keep an eye open for that, for information. Check your email, look on the website, and we'll be able to get you more information on him. So let's just open in prayer. Lord, thanks so much for this evening together that we can discuss, think about your word, think about our creativity and the giftings you've given us. Thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to share with one another tonight. Amen. So let's start by looking at a few nice quotes from C.S. Lewis, an artist of great skill, writing to us from an era in which certain standards of excellence were the norm, the standard. See how these might apply to your own art form. Feel free to take notes to remind you of what you want to discuss later on. An author, you might say artist, sculptor, poet, actor, etc., should never conceive himself as bringing into existence beauty or wisdom which did not exist before, but simply and solely as trying to embody, in terms of his own art, some reflection of eternal beauty and wisdom. That's C.S. Lewis, Christian Reflections. The next quote is from The Weight of Glory by C.S. These things, the beauty, the memory of our own past, are good images of what we really desire. But if they are mistaken for the thing itself, they turn into dumb idols, breaking the hearts of their worshippers. For they are not the thing itself. They are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune that we have not heard, news from a country we have never yet visited. And thirdly, from Till We Have Faces, Lewis says, child, to say the very thing you really mean, the whole of it, nothing more or less, or other than what you really mean, that's the whole art and joy of words. Those are spectacular choices for quotes. Deb actually prepared talk tonight, and she took ill, so I had to take over. But I'm so thrilled to be able to present this tonight, and I think these quotes are really great and lots to think on. Whatever our craft, whether writing like C.S. Lewis, our wise guide this year, or visual performing arts, or cooking, handicrafts, arts appreciation, whatever, we are called to excellence in it. This is the main term tonight that we have to keep in mind before we share, like the word excellence. This is what we're aiming for. It's expected not only by those people who engage with our art, but by God himself. We can all think of biblical heroes of the faith who served God through work excellently done and were commended by God for their faith. For example, think of the description in Exodus 25 and following about the making of the temple and all its fixings, demanding great skill by the artists, architects, woodworkers, jewelers, goldsmiths, tailors. You know the one. That's the one that everybody reads, right? All the artists know about that one. Daniel 6 verse 3 says, "Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom." I'm sure you can think of many other examples of excellence in the products biblical artists brought to God. In addition to these many stories, consider a few specific commands to artists and to us all from the Bible. Substitute your own art form as I read these verses. Colossians 3:23. "Whatever you do, work heartily, as for the Lord and not for men." 1 Corinthians 10:31. "Whatever you do in word or deed, do all to the glory of God." Titus 2:7 and 8. "Show yourself in all respects to be a model of good works, and in your teaching show integrity, dignity, and sound speech that cannot be condemned, so that an opponent may be put to shame, having nothing evil to say about us." Matthew 5:14-16. "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." And Philippians 4:8, one of my favorite verses. "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think of these things." So let's just talk a little bit about the word excellence. Keep in mind, excellence is not perfection, but rather to do or be better than, to surpass, to continue getting better. In other words, there's no stopping. There's no like, I've attained excellence, period. That's it. That's the top. That's as good as it gets. And so I see this as very much of a continuing process. And I think it's important for us to keep in mind that in one sense, all artists, whatever kind of artist you are, all artists are showmen. Our purpose is to express what is within. We want to show others our expression. The expressing by itself is not necessarily good art. Since Deb could not lead the discussion this evening, I'm going to use her example that she's written. And so here it is, her examples. Deb is a writer. She writes fiction for readers. but this is applicable to all arts. Consider her personal journaling. She writes out in detail. She expresses and processes her raw feelings and thoughts. But this would not be for the public's eyes. It's for her alone and God, of course. It may be full of goodness in terms of message, but it is not yet technically good art. Good art must be polished and ready for presentation to others so as to be of maximum use. And about polishing art, C.S. Lewis wrote in a letter to a schoolgirl, and I quote, "Take great pains to be clear. Remember that, though you start by knowing what you mean, the reader, art engager, doesn't. And a single ill-chosen word may lead him to a total misunderstanding." Good art, then, is intentional and successful. It's a successful act of communication. It is also audience-centered. The point of intentional communication is to evoke within the soul of the partaker the meaning, the goal of your art. We must set a bar, embrace standards we hold to regarding our craft. And what are your hopes and dreams with your craft? For Deb, when she intentionally sets out to write, she asks herself, what will be my goal in feeling like a writer, in considering myself to be successful, able to call myself a writer in my heart, that most valued of professions to me? My answer, she says, to publish at least 3 novels that have won recognition by valued writers, organizations, and readers, end quote. So this means that her work has undergone objective critique based on standards of excellence. It's important for each of us to ask these questions about our development as artists and the development of our craft. The twofold aspect of the discussion on excellence today becomes, how have I attained or will I continue to attain excellence in my chosen craft? And how do I know when I am good enough in my art to put it out there? And we'll also talk about our next steps and how we can put this into action. So to kick off the discussion, let's ponder this, and I'll ask the question again. How have I attained or will I continue to attain excellence in my chosen craft? You can make it personal and share how you have done this. You can discuss your education or how critique has helped you or anything else. So let's just open it up now. I can, as you're thinking about what you'd like to say, it can be obvious answers or obscure, I don't really care. But we'll talk maybe 5 minutes or so about this. So the first thing I thought of in becoming more excellent is to expose myself to good art. I am a visual artist, so to expose myself to art galleries would be one example. Does somebody else want to share some examples?
I'm a visual artist as well, and recently I had 2 painters who I really admire, and both who are known for being good painters in our community, come and spend some time with me and the paintings I'm doing to give me feedback and critique. Yeah.
Great. And how was that for you?
Oh, it was lovely with them. I did. It came after showing the same work to someone else I admired, and who actually mentored me, was one of my mentors, and they didn't like my work, and which was pretty devastating. But after about 3 days, I just thought, no, she's not right. She doesn't get it. And then I worked some more, and I reached out to 2 other artists, and they had different things to say. which is really wonderful. But it's all, I think the point is that I really want my work to be worth, to be of merit, to be, you know, I do have a trouble with the idea of excellence myself. So I for me, the language is, it needs to be worth it. It needs to be good, you know? So
great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yes, Sharon.
There's also a comment on the chat. But also, you know, to take lessons with somebody who is already a professional artist and get their feedback as they're teaching you. And, you know, they can sort of give you indicators as how far you are along the process of getting to excellence.
Great. Thank you.
So isn't it that we, since we're artists in whatever way, whatever our craft is, the perfectionist in us is almost prideful, and we always will fall short of it as we pursue it. And so there's this struggle as an artist, right? And then knowing that no matter what we create, we're always falling short. And I think a certain amount of acceptance of that is important, even though we still, you know, drive ourselves crazy trying to be perfect. And because we can't be perfect, we drive ourselves to be insecure, right? And then, you know, at times we'll you know, maybe cry about how awful our art is, or if somebody else thinks it's awful. But in reality, you know, what does that matter if we're truly expressing ourselves and you know, acceptable to God?
Well, that's it. And I think we do have to value both the message and our heart, and as well as the skill. But I think we tend to get down on ourselves about the skill more than we do about the message. and
Absolutely.
So to pay attention to it is good, but we don't have to be thinking about it while we're creating. That's the good part. And I heard last week, some guy said, learn all you can about, you know, like learn about the principles, learn about the elements, apply them, practice them. And then when you pull your paints out to paint a picture, forget about all that, right? Like get completely out of that mindset and into the creative. And that's where I believe that bubbling up of our skill will come. And I agree with you, not to be too hard on ourselves. Like maybe instead of perfection, is it good enough? Is it good enough? Right? Like, will this do? Is it clear enough? I don't know. Any other thoughts before I?
Yeah. Deb said in the chat, from the writer's point of view, to read the classics, and my answer was the same. That's what I do over summers too. But I read these classic pieces of literature, and not necessarily comparing myself to them, but kind of recognizing that they have achieved excellence, which they practice over many decades. Often their best works were published at the end of their life, right? And so by reading their work and observing their craft, I'm kind of absorbing those standards that I can then work towards myself. So I treat them as an inspiration to work on my excellence in my craft.
Thank you. Any other thoughts before we continue?
I do have a thought. I'm not sure if it fits in here. But can I, should I start it and just see if it does? what's coming to mind was when I was in art college and I had skills that were consistent with the classical form of making art. I was able to do figurative work well, portraiture well, like the Western analytical, and it was praised in art college, and there was another student who didn't do art that way. And I often think of her, and I recognize her now as she was an Aboriginal woman. And her work, its basis was totally different. It was colours and pattern and she wasn't seen as doing excellent work. And I thought she was doing gorgeous work. But so it's always bothered me that her work was treated that way. And so I think that's why I have, like, what is excellence, and is it really necessary for art?
The Aboriginal work I've seen, all has beautiful aesthetics, and they have patterns, and there's colors, there's contrasts, there's balance, like all those traditional standards of excellence in visual art, it's there. So maybe it's just that the school didn't recognize that. They didn't have a broad enough view of the elements and the principles. Possibly? You're muted.
Yeah, maybe. Again, they didn't. Yeah, my thought isn't complete, so I'll just leave that for now and just put that out there. And
that's a really good. No, I think that's a really good thought. Does anyone have any comments to say to that?
Well, I'm not the artist, but listening to the discussion, when you're talking about the talents, I literally think of the parable of the talents, where God does give out in the Bible story, talents actually mean money, but it has a nice double meaning for us as your skill level. God has divvied out the skills to everybody in every culture as He has deemed fit. He doesn't. We live in an age where everything's digitized. We can look at not just our people that are contemporaries doing art, but the great ones of the past, all kind of online for us to see. And it's not that we measure up to them, but we measure up to what God has given to us. And are we building on that? God was asking us, are you building on what I gave you to start with? That's the big question. And how does He value what you built? If you do it for His glory, the gold precious stones, or are you doing it just for vanity, hay, wood, and stubble? That's the way we have to kind of look at these things as, being Christians as we go forward in our daily lives.
Oh, that's great. Like building on what you've been given. I think that's a really beautiful perspective. And it keeps you away from that perfectionistic kind of thinking.
Well, He's the only perfect one. He just divvies up little bits of His greatness to us for us to work with and entrusted with us.
I like the comment on the talents, because my talent was buried in the dirt for a long time, and came out maybe when I was 24. I was an artist when I was real young, stopped, and then my son was born. And that actually, I have a different view, or maybe not a different view, but a view on the talents, is that's how I got saved, right? I started to embrace God's talent and the more and more that He gave me, right? I'm not a musician, I'm an artist. I write poetry. And the more that I started to explore that, the more truth I was finding within myself. And then eventually I had my born again experience. So I think talents are key, right? It's different for everybody, how you get there, but for artists, understanding our talents. might get you saved, right?
Yeah, it's lovely. Thank you. So I'm just going to probably repeat a few of the ideas that have come up and maybe fill in some blanks using Deb's notes here. So different ways. First of all, to know we're heading towards excellence is to have a solid education. This isn't just formal education, but I'll start with that. So formal education, to know the very basics of our craft. For example, writing for publication demands that Deb has an excellent grasp of at least grammar, punctuation, elements of literature, and so on. She learned these fundamentals at college and then at grad school. Then there's continuing education of the craft. Today, I actually personally watched an excellent video. It's from acrylicuniversity.com, and Jed is just great. He's really sincere, and he's an excellent teacher. And, you know, yes, my pride kind of jumps in there a little bit. It's like, I don't want to learn from another teacher. I'm a teacher, right? And then I'm going, no. And there's just so much valuable stuff we can learn from others, right? And so now I just love this resource. And so that's like a continuing education on YouTube for me. For Deb, her academic editorial work has taken her into style guides for the best English. There's self-learning the classics, which was brought up. Artists who set the foundations of good arts. For Deb, a wide reading of British literature and of her genre, continued learning through classes, teaching of writing, etc. And then there's experience while hands-on learning. For Deb, this means publishing at beginning levels, unpaid at first, like the school paper in third grade, and for the college paper and also local newspapers, not fiction, just to practice, working in writing for a magazine, not fiction, speaking to groups to develop her own thoughts. And I'd like to add too, to take courage and not be afraid of failure, and using the failures as places of learning as well. And regarding critique, and that was brought up in the discussion, I would say, do I have critiquing skills to apply to myself and others' art? If someone asks you for your opinion on their art, do you know the difference between critiquing and criticizing? And that goes for yourself too, you know, not just, oh, I hate it. Like, that's really not an objective critical view of it. First of all, turn it upside down if it's a piece of art, or have a friend read it and, you know, get another opinion, right? So we can go to mentorship, which was mentioned. So mentor under an expert you want to emulate, even if not in person, someone who is better than you, than you are. At the craft. Seek out feedback, not from everybody, and not from those who know you, and not just from those who know you and want to please and encourage you, right? But from other artists that are going to be honest with you, and other experts that are going to be honest with you. Not just an editor, but someone who can help us change when we are doing what we are doing, and to improve towards our vision of excellence. Also humility, to not insist that we know it all, but just learn. And suffer rejection and see it not as failure, but as a learning opportunity, as I mentioned. So now we're going to break into our second discussion, which is, how do we know when we are good enough in our art to put it out there? So how do you know that it's good enough? That is, we are each of us individuals who want to intentionally communicate something through our chosen form. But who are we to say what we've done is good enough or isn't good enough? How can we have confidence that will qualify for our art, that the quality of our art is valuable? I believe that when we have a base of knowledge and we're practicing standards of excellence in our field or genre, it will bubble up, as I mentioned earlier. We may not even be conscious of it, but we're applying the skill the same way. Let's say when we learn how to swim or we learn how to ride a bike, it's a skill. And then we can just get on our bikes and paint or read or dance, whatever we're doing, right? But so more specifically, where might we go to find out, to test, to see if our work is good enough? And for example, to follow, like, am I good enough? Okay, think about, how do you find out, are you good enough? What do you do to find out if you're good enough? I will sometimes go to a teaching thing where it's like how to critique a piece of art, and I will look at my art and I'll go through that process the same way a teacher would. And it's not as objective as if somebody else were doing it, but it's a start for me. So anyone else?
Yeah, if you're a writer, I'm a writer and an artist, I would send out my work to beta readers first before I get there to publish, get their feedback and see if there's anything that they pick up that I've missed. If someone was wearing a blue dress, for instance, and later down the road they've got a green dress, and, that doesn't make sense. Those sort of things that they pick up. And, for my art, I would definitely just show it to a few of my artist friends first and see what they think. But also somebody who's actually taught me, their skills and that, to ask them whether they think it's good enough. And if they say, yeah, you can put it out, I will do so.
So these would be your target audience that you're sending it out to. Then.
That's right, yes.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I was thinking about in the same vein, right? Does it reach an audience? And does audience respond to it? In your case, like beta readers, for example, you could share with in the forum that kind of is filled with art appreciators in your genre and in your style, and see how they respond to it honestly. People who don't really know you, how they respond to your art. Are you getting the message you wanted across? And that's what Lizzie said in the chat too. Does it say what I wanted to say?
So I sort of found the opposite. When I started caring what other people thought, my work became marginalized and average. And when I stopped caring what everybody thought, my art and vision sort of exploded into what I'm looking for it to be. So although with the right people, don't get me wrong, there are right people to bring a criticism, and it's welcome. When the wrong people bring a criticism, it falls on deaf ears. And as early as an artist, some 20, 30 years ago, I struggled with that. Hey, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Now I could care less what you think. And I think that has, that may be maturity as an artist, because, we all go, I think we all go through that, right? What's right in the gallery, what's going to sell, what's not going to sell. And, of recent anyways, it is, I don't want to sound egotistical, even though it kind of is, but at the same time, I have this piece, you can sort of see it peeking behind their frequency. I showed you guys before. The worst comment anybody's ever made about it was wow, right? So everybody else, I got these great comments, which is I enjoy, but I knew it was a wow before I showed it to anybody. And there are some that maybe aren't, who, maybe aren't liking my work, and so go down there and like the other work, right? So I think developing as an artist, I'm not sure where and when that turned. I want to say maybe 5 years ago, and then certainly of recent. But I remember being stuck for years, caring what other people thought, building the resume per se, and got to get into whatever gallery it is I got to get into, or show wherever it is I got to show, and the work was all marginalized. So much so, I probably, I tell this story all the time. I have a good friend of mine, and I noticed it in my work when I was a painter, and I went and I had a bonfire of, I don't know, about 10 paintings. And he goes, "You're going to burn those 10 paintings?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, I'll take them. I said, "They're $2,000 a piece." He goes, "What? You're going to burn them?" I said, "That's right. Unless you buy them for $2,000 a piece." And I burned them. Right. So, I mean, I think the artist needs to be authentic to themselves. Somebody may have liked those pieces and they were marginally good. But I think we got to hold ourselves up a little bit higher than, say, what some others may or may not think about our work. I think it's important, but I don't think it's all that important when we're showing our work.
I mean, you kind of used a few terms there, like, maturity, right? And you have to pick and choose who you're going to ask what they think. And that's only people that's really more about, am I being clear? Like, if you have a technical question, like you're creating something, you're having trouble making something stick together somehow, right? Then you'll look for someone to help you get where you want to be. So that's the kind of thing that that we look for as we mature. And when we're young, I think we do have to kind of care less usually what just the general public thinks. That's a whole nother story. But we have to seek out people who know more, so that we're like pushed to be better, but not be yanked around. I agree. Like, that's a really good point that you bring up. I think a lot of people are yanked about in every direction. And that has to go away, right?
Yeah. In response to Sean, Deb said in the chat, yes, we must be careful about who we choose to expose our work to. We aren't talking about someone liking it, but does the piece, as Lizzie says, say what I wanted to say? Yes. As Lewis said, child, to say the very thing you really mean, the whole of it, nothing more or less or other than what you really mean. That's the whole art and joy of words.
Perfect. Thanks, Deb.
There's a sorry, Robert, you go first.
Oh, okay. There I am. No, my head's ready to explode with all this stuff. I mean, I kind of have to agree with Sean. Like, I got to a point in my life where I don't care what anybody thinks, and it doesn't matter. But enough people, as Sean also said, that people who know, like, I've got enough responses from them that I know I'm on the right track. Like, it verifies, like, what I've been doing, like, all along. And as far as polishing goes, I just keep working until it rings true. Like, the work just starts talking to me, and it's like this, talking about excitement, this bubbling up excitement, and I don't put like a time restriction on it. I just let it happen. And a lot of times, I don't know where the art's going. I'm just following the process, and I trust the process. I trust my instincts, my internal compass, my inner promptings, and they've been known. They are reliable and true, and each piece has their own identity. It's like revealing itself to me. As like a child, like different children, the different personalities. I allow for the personalities to come through. In a lot of ways, it's like giving birth. It's like as close as I'll ever know to giving birth to something. Taking something from nothing and birthing it into the world. It's like impossible. I mean, the whole thing is impossible, but yet, I've done it. And I keep doing it. And, even as far as success goes, like, I mean, I kind of turn my back on the whole art world. I believe in the art world up until about 1990. But today there's so much sensationalism, decadence, just like crap, art fairs and all kinds of crap. And like, but the history of art, I know the history of art, and it meant something. Like the abstract expressionists, those people meant something. That they were like dealing with the historic, death of God and trying to find God through their work, And then you have somebody like Andy Warhol, who was a usurper of that, and like I see him as very irreverent. Like when you look at him in the light of the abstract expressionists. Well, these are just some thoughts. I mean, again, I'm sorry I'm rambling, but
No,
again, it's just so much proof of thought here. It's just like mind blowing.
well, I think it's really relevant what you're saying. You've described beautifully the process of creating art and making art, and I'm glad you brought up like the deconstructionist direction that our culture has gone in. So we can look back to dead critics. We can look back to the history of art for our direction to find our firm standing, right? And we can go boldly and create and not worry about what the world is telling us, whether it's good or not. Like that, if we know it's good, technically good, then we don't have to worry about it. And if we're not sure, we know where to go to find out if it's technically good, right? Because we have standards of beauty that we find in the cosmos from God, right? And so this is where we get it. Just want to mention a few things before we get into our final discussion, and that is a few practical things we can do to test to see if we're good enough is we can enter contests. We could seek opportunities. So for Deb's first stories were not her current stories. Like, so what does the publisher accept? What do the readers want? So that's a little bit like kind of working to just get some of the work accepted. Maybe you're feeling you're compromising a little bit, but you're getting yourself out there, and maybe that's what you have to break through, like but you don't compromise who you are. You might just find out what their standards are wherever you're looking. And then, when we submit into an art show, we have to see what the theme is, and then we have to work towards that theme. We could do that as sort of a form of discipline too, right? We can reach beyond what we've already attained. So if we're satisfied where we're at, we can still, challenge ourselves with a contest. Let's say Deb used to write for a contest. Deb used to write for, now don't send. She doesn't send to, because she often wins and then takes away the joy for others. So if it's like a lower skilled contest, then she wouldn't bother doing that because it's not much of a challenge for her. So she's now asked to judge the same organizations, right? And then to make some contribution. And then that stretches her as a writer. Offer to serve in your area of craft for Deb judging fiction contests, because though not an expert, she does know more than some in some areas and can contribute. And she's also taught a continuing education class in communities. So, and I personally find teaching really stretches me as an artist too. And like I'm learning things to teach, and I'm going, oh, I didn't know that. and then, or I practice it with my students, and then I get better at it as well. So our third part is just a very loose. The last few minutes, we're just going to share what we want, brainstorm about great practical places where we can build our art. For example, if I was a dancer, is there a dance studio I can go and take dance lessons at? Or can I teach dance lessons? Or what, like, or go on YouTube and learn things. So just go at it and brainstorm all you want about practical, like maybe next steps, what you're going to do next to build your craft, to develop. Any ideas? Well, we're looking for like sources, basically, right? Sources to build art.
Well, one of the things I do is I go out into the country, right? I go camping. I go to the Outer Banks, and I'm a light artist, and then I get write some very good poetry in these environments, or I'm inspired by it. Although I do go to the museums, I am very disappointed in things that are going on. The art world has turned into high-priced hoarders, right? Most of it is 90% of it's garbage. There's some great ones out there, though. And to find the great ones takes some pursuit, and they're very inspiring as well. But I think for me, anyways, as an artist, certainly, you ready? Reading the Word, reading the Bible, is very inspiring. Knowing and understanding what the Lord's done for me personally is very inspiring. And then enjoying His creation is inspiring. And then finding, great art after that can be inspiring.
So are you saying the Bible actually helps you to become more skilled at what you do?
Well, how about this? It's yes. And then in the way of refinement, right? Refinement of my soul and spirit, where it kind of forces me to, express myself differently now than, say, a few years back. For me, I became broken, shattered. And in that, there was real truth that came out of me, out of my heart. And that's what I'm working anyways to express, is that honesty where, I mentioned before, I cared what other people may have thought or what I thought they may have thought. And now it's art's something I do, right? It's not who I am. And so, the Bible's been, all along has been very inspiring to me. But even more so now, walking with the Holy Spirit, and so on. But for me, it was to be broken and shattered per se, that allowed me to see what God has done for me. And that has been inspiring.
Yeah, thank you. That certainly is motivating to create that, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else have any?
That kind of goes along with what Lizzie was saying in the chat, is that because she has practiced her art skills, and the Lord has been accelerating those skills, right? So the more we practice our craft, the better we get at it. And another point that Sean made that I really like is that in current art world, especially the worldly standards, have gone down. So they are not as great. And that's not something to aspire to. So as artists looking at the greats of the past and allowing God to bring forth that excellence, we have a chance to preserve those excellency standards for the future generations, and we might be recognized for it later on when people in the future look back at what was happening in the art scene at the moment, right?
Thank you. Yes, Cornelia.
So I was making some noises and realized I wasn't on mute. I have a contrasting view to what I'm hearing about people saying about the art world and contemporary art. I regularly read Border Crossings, which is the excellent magazine published in Winnipeg that keeps you up with what's current and the very hardworking artists that are working. I'm interested in contemporary art. There is a lot of excellence in the contemporary art scene. And part of the reason we may not know that is because we don't know, and because we're unfamiliar with what's happening in the contemporary art world. There is the greed, there is the big moneyed art world that all of us, it's kind of like, well, you know, not everybody gets to play NHL hockey, but does that stop us from admiring the hockey? Even though they're getting the big bucks, do we go, well, I can never get that because they've got the big bucks and I'll never get that? We admire hockey, and and people play hockey on all sorts of different levels, and I sort of feel like that's the same for us as artists. And I disagree that excellence was in the past. Excellence is here now. We just need to become more familiar about what contemporary art's about and what modern art is about. So
yeah, I'd love to jump in here. I think you'll find if you got to know us, most of us are contemporary artists. So it's not like we're against contemporary art, but the philosophies of deconstructionism and relative truth are very strong, which doesn't make the art bad. It means some of the messages are not truthful, you know, or some of the messages are based in, pornography, let's say, not just nudity, but you disagree with that. You think that that all art is good?
Yeah, well, I hear it a lot. I hear it a lot from Christians about postmodernism and modernism and contemporary art, and that it's shock value and that it's pornographic and stuff. There is that sort of art around, but there's a lot that isn't.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a lot. There's a lot of beautiful art. And I think when we're talking about
I'm just responding.
But when we're talking about standards of beauty, we're just talking about standards of beauty. That's not in the past or anyway, it's in the past, future, it's everywhere. And it's all through all time. So just to clarify that. So
I agree with
I'll be able to go out on it and say Kapoor, Kusama, right? Those artists, I think, are fabulous. They're a small percentage. I will debate you about Damien Hirst till the end of time, where he is just a sellout and garbage. And I'd tell him to his face if I saw him. There's a lot of artists like that are just, it becomes a commodity, a way of exchanging money, right? And it's really deteriorated the quality of the art. Now, the guy has talent, right? But what's he using his talent for? I would challenge that. And I go to New York frequently, and I'm just not seeing it. However, Pace and Zwirner are great galleries. You'll never see, well, very rarely will you see bad art in these galleries, right? They're setting the bar high, and everybody else is following, and they're following with a low quality of art across the board. There are 2 galleries locally where I live in DC that do a great job, and then there's garbage. Really, it just is, and it's unfortunate. But the same's been true throughout history, right? In the art world throughout history, we don't know of all the guys that, and women or whoever, artists that made substandard art because it's not around anymore. But the Van Goghs around, the Picasso's around, the Matisse's around, Andy Warhol. I don't like Andy Warhol's work, but I admire his genius, right? So I think the artist needs to raise it up in the art world, and I have no problem expressing my opinions on it, and do actually. I'm polite, but
sorry, it's really hard for me not to feel. I'm feeling disappointed because I'm responding to what I hear, and I am new, but I'm already in this small meeting. I've heard 1, 2, 3, 4 people express opinions that are so different to what I know of the contemporary art world and to what I know. Like when we watch, it's easy enough to get to know what contemporary artists are doing by watching Art 21. And in there's lots of artists who are taking themes that are very dear to our hearts as Christians, like community and prejudice and culture and justice and stuff like that. And I wouldn't know about them because they don't do the Damien Hirst thing and get all the sensation. Right?
Yeah, Art 21 is a different, it is more of the elite type artist as a rule. So Art 21 is not necessarily representation of my comment, right? And although there's a lot of artists I don't like in the Art 21. So I'm talking about the scene itself. I'm talking about, I went to Freeze last year and absolute garbage, all of it.
And that's the thing, like,
your opinion.
If I can, we have to finish up because we're going over, and I don't want to cut anyone off, and I want to recognize the point that Cornelia is making here, which and to clarify and to make sure it's clear that we love contemporary art, and we don't care if it's Christian art or made by Christians or non-Christians. And that's not, it's just, it may have come across in such a way that way because today we're focused on skill only. We're trying to avoid talking about messages. There are beautiful messages out there, and there are ugly messages out there. There's beautiful skill out there, and there's horrible skill out there. And today we're just trying to kind of focus in on what are we personally doing as artists to build our own skill based on standards of beauty. And what by standards of beauty, not the standards necessarily that were made by Middle Ages artists, but by the standards of beauty that we learn about in Jesus Christ and in the cosmos and in nature. Is that kind of clear? Like, I'm just trying to make this sort of a general and very kind of specific personally.
Yeah, that would be it would be a great subject for discussion, like everything that you're saying now. That would be fantastic. I just I think I'm just a little tired of hearing Christians sort of say the same old things about modern and contemporary art.
My
And
non-Christian friends
we
are
aren't
saying the
talking.
same.
Wait. We're not talking about modern contemporary art.
Yeah.
I can tell you some very ugly art from 1,000 years ago.
I know.
We're not
I just
talking
want to clarify that my response was to what.
Yeah. And I understand. And I know there was one bash thing of contemporary art was bashed, and that was their opinion. And you have your opinion, and we recognize both of them, and they're good opinions. I do. Yeah. I think that they're valid opinions, both of them.
We do have to acknowledge that there is lots of good art, great art among contemporary artists.
Yeah.
And then again, another example would be film. But the thing is that not everything that is made that is great is popular. For example, I noticed in film, like big studios like Hollywood are producing substandard things lately. But what is happening is that many independent studios are coming up with great films, and they become so popular because they resonate with the audience, right? So, you know.
Yeah, just to
so I'm sorry, but we have to.
Well, I would just have one quick comment. Quick comment, and that is my non-Christian art friends feel the same way.
Yeah. Okay, and I think that to bring it back to skill, I know it seems really, really like minor now compared to this big topic we're talking about, but I just want to read through these notes and end it, and that ways that we can reach out and get better at our own craft, whatever craft we do, is to befriend other artists and have discussions like this and hash it out and take time when we have time to do it. Cornelia, we can have a chat anytime. Join groups and associations that you resonate with, and organizations and programs that you love, and then you can build your craft that way. Offer your services. Join book clubs with resources to build your own library. Continue doing your continuing education stuff online, YouTube videos. Make YouTube videos, whatever. And so there are so many different ways. Go to university, take a course, or avoid university. Like it doesn't, but there are ways to build your skill. And I want you to go home and think personally, because it's way too easy to just start talking philosophical stuff rather than, okay, where do I have a weakness right now? Am I avoiding getting better at something because I'm afraid of it? Or like, I know personally, I tend to not read a lot of poetry, but I write it, and I wonder maybe I'm limiting my skill by not reading it. If I were to start reading more poetry, perhaps that would make me better at my skill. And so that's a challenge for me, and that's something that I can challenge myself to do today. So just try to think in your own lives how you can challenge yourself. And so we'll end our conversation. Thanks for joining us, and I really appreciate this talk tonight.